Good day, everyone. Now, I will be discussing about the two viruses which are SARS coronavirus for human and squash mosaic virus for plants. So first is the SARS coronavirus for human. Here are the classification and characteristics of severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2 or known as COVID-19. A severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2 is a highly transmissible and pathogenic coronavirus that emerged in late 2019 and has caused a pandemic of acute respiratory disease named Coronavirus Disease 2019 or COVID-19, which threatens human health and public safety. In this review, we describe the basic virology of SARS-CoV-2, including genomic characteristics and receptor use, highlighting its key difference from previously known coronaviruses. We summarize current knowledge of clinical, epidemiological, and pathological features of COVID-19, as well as recent progress in animal models and antiviral treatment approaches for SARS-CoV-2 infection. We also discuss the potential wildlife host and zoonotic origin of this emerging virus in detail. So viruses like SARS-CoV-2 continuously evolve as changes in the genetic code or genetic mutations occur during replication of the genome. A lineage is a genetically closely related group of virus variants derived from a common ancestor. As expected, multiple variants of SARS-CoV-2 have been documented in the United States and globally throughout this pandemic. To inform local outbreak investigations and understand national trends, scientists compare genetic differences between viruses to identify variants and how they are related to each other. Genetic lineage of SARS-CoV-2 have been emerging and circulating around the world since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. So let's move on to its pathology and pathogenesis of severe acute respiratory syndrome. So severe acute respiratory syndrome is an emerging infectious viral disease characterized by severe clinical manifestations of the lower respiratory tract. The pathogenesis of SARS is highly complex, with multiple factors leading to severe injury in the lungs and dissemination of the virus to several other organs. The SARS coronavirus targets the epithelial cells of the respiratory tract, resulting in diffuse alveolar damage. Several organs or cell types may be infected in the course of illness, including mucosal cells of the intestines, tubular epithelial cells of the kidneys, neurons of the brain, and several types of immune cells, and certain organs may suffer from indirect injury. Extensive studies have provided a basic understanding of the pathogenesis of this disease. In this review, we describe the most significant pathological features of SARS, explore the etiological factors causing these pathological changes, and discuss the major pathogenic mechanisms. It seems that both abnormal immune responses and injury to immune cells may be key factors in the pathogenesis of this new disease. So, what are the complications of COVID-19? So, the complications may include pneumonia, acute respiratory distress syndrome, multi-organ failure, septic shock, and death. So, what are the organs most affected by COVID-19? So, the lungs are the organs most affected by COVID-19. Since the virus are very critical and dangerous to human, still we can prevent and control it. So, the preventive measures include first, We have physical or social distancing. Next, quarantining. Next is covering coughs and sneezes, hand washing, and keeping unwashed hands away from the face. Lastly, the use of face masks or coverings has been recommended in the public settings to minimize the risk of transmissions. Moreover, vaccination is the most effective way to prevent SARS-CoV-2 infection. So the COVID-19 treatment guidelines panel. It is very recommends for COVID-19 vaccination as soon as possible for everyone who is eligible according to CDC's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. So the ecological or medical impact of this virus. So emerging coronavirus have dramatically influenced human health as the coronavirus pandemic rapidly sweeps across the world. It is inducing a considerable degree of fear, worry, and concern in the population and at large and among certain groups in particular, such as older adults, care providers, and people with underlying health conditions. In public mental health terms, the main psychological impact to date is elevated rates of stress or anxiety. But as new measures and impacts are introduced, especially quarantine and its effects on many people's usually activities, routines, or livelihoods, levels of loneliness, depression, harmful alcohol and drug use, and self-harm or suicidal behavior are also expected to rise. So, next is the squash mosaic virus, the virus for plants. Here are the characteristics and classifications of squash mosaic virus. Squash mosaic virus is a mosaic virus disease common in squash plants in other plants, including melons of the family Cucurbitaceae. Gardeners are always on the lookout for problems in their plants, checking them carefully for bugs and signs of disease. When a squash begins developing strange symptoms that don't appear to be caused by bacteria or fungus, squash mosaic virus may be on the loose in the garden. This virus is no joking matter and must be handled promptly. So let's discuss the mosaic virus symptoms. Squash mosaic virus is usually apparent from the earliest leaves, since this disease is frequently seed-borne. As susceptible plants mature, symptoms can be all but disappear, making diagnosis difficult, but early leaves are typically distorted or mottled. Although at Although an older plant can appear more or less normal, mosaic disease of squash causing reduced vigor, poor branching, and mottling of maturing fruits. So next is the pathogenesis of squash mosaic virus. More obvious cases of squash mosaic virus include symptoms like infected leaves that cup upward or develop irregular patterns of dark and light coloration. So squash leaves are sometimes distorted, blistered, or unusually hard. The fruits of these plants develop raised, dome-shaped swelling. So how to control mosaic viruses? So once plants are infected, there is no cure for mosaic viruses. Because of this, prevention is the key. However, if plants in your garden do show symptoms of having mosaic viruses, here's how to minimize the damage. So first, remove all infected plants and destroy them. Do not put them in the compost pile as the virus may persist in infected plant matter. Burn infected plants or throw them out with the garbage. Next, monitor the rest of your plants closely, especially those that were located near infected plants. Next, disinfect gardening tools after every use. Keep a bottle of a weak bleach solution or other antiviral disinfectant to wipe your tools down with. So how to prevent mosaic viruses? So here are the preventive solutions for squash mosaic virus. So plant virus resistant varieties in your garden. Resistant varieties of tomatoes have yet to be developed for cucumber mosaic virus, but tomatoes that are resistant to tobacco mosaic virus may have some slight resistance to cucumber mosaic virus, as well as or including the squash mosaic virus. So next, since mosaic virus are mostly spread by insects, especially aphids and leaf hoppers, you can try covering your plants with a floating row cover or aluminum foil mulches to prevent these insects from infecting your plants. So, control your weeds. So, that's one. Sometimes may serve as host for this disease. And when aphids and other insects feed on these plants, they will spread the viruses to your garden plants. So, to avoid seed-borne mosaic viruses, soak seeds of susceptible plants in a 10% bleach solution before planting. So, here are the ecological impact of this virus. Can plant viruses infect humans? So, it is currently accepted that a strict separation exists between plant and vertebrate viruses regarding their host range and pathogenicity, and plant viruses are believed to infect only plants. Accordingly, plant viruses are not considered to present potential pathogenicity to humans and other vertebrates. So next, can you eat squash with mosaic virus? So, yes, you can eat squash and melons that are infected with mosaic virus. These viruses are not harmful to humans and do not cause the fruit to rot. Often the discoloration is only skin deep. In cases where fruit are severely distorted, the texture of the fruit may be affected and may not be desirable for eating. So those are the viruses for plants and human that exist. So we should be aware and keep ourselves safety. At the same time, manage our plants properly. So that's end my report. I hope you learned something. Thank you.